Jeanne, with this announcement, are the purple states any less purple?
I think they are more up for grabs for the Democrats. I think one of the big deciding factors we are hearing for President Biden was the fact that you saw states that should be reliably blue or somewhat reliably blue, like Minnesota, New Hampshire. You're talking about my home state of New York, New Jersey, that those were creeping into the red, or as you said, the purple. And that is a big problem. And I think that's where he saw the writing on the wall. If Donald Trump expanded that battleground, very, very difficult for Joe Biden to win, hence his decision today.
David Gura and Joe Matthew, jump in here with Professor Zaino.
Yeah, let me just ask you sort of what you see playing out here in the next 24 hours. So as I say, we had this very quick endorsement from the president. As Joe and Tom were talking about just a few minutes ago, the impulse here is going to be to get the vice president on the road. She has been on the road, has been holding events and rallies. How do you see this week beginning? How do you see it gaining steam as it continues? Jeanne, if you would.
Oh, that was to me. Yes, I'm sorry.
No,
Thank
you're
you
good. You're good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Kamala Harris, $2 million in Cape Cod yesterday. I think the thinking among many Democrats, can't speak for all of them, is that this is a quick handover. We saw the endorsement. It is a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris campaign, so that she is able to take over the campaign, the apparatus, the fundraising, which is tremendous, and move forward. I think the big question hanging over everybody's head is there going to be a contest? I am skeptical that we will see a contest at this point, particularly given how quickly President Biden endorsed her. But it is still a possibility. The other thing is, and the lawyers know this better than I do, is that there may be some contest in terms of can she take over this campaign apparatus? I'm describing it as a Biden-Harris campaign. It is, but there may be legal challenges to that. If there's not, she'll take that over. And then I think it's harder for us to see a contest. And then the big question is going to be, what do the delegates do, of course, and who does she choose as her vice presidential running mate at this point?
Jeanne, I look at a piece by Greg Corte, our colleague in Washington, kind of walking through a number of these issues, and I'm going to let Joe Matthew jump in here in just a sec. But I'm seeing here, the way that this is likely to unfold, what's likely to happen at that convention, and what's going to happen with those donations. Joe, jump in here if you would.
You can hear me. That's a good thing. I just wondered if maybe we can take me out of my ear. We're getting a little psychedelic here in Washington, but I wondered, Jeanne, your thoughts.
Okay, we're going to leave. We have some technical challenges here with Washington. It has to do with the heat. It's like the tunnel on the way to New Jersey. The wires are down, so we're having some heat. Jeanne, are you there, please?
I am here.
Okay, we're working out.
I know the tunnels well.
It's the heat. What can I say? David Gura and Tom Keene with a host of people in Washington that we're setting up right now, and we're thrilled to bring you good conversation on this historic moment. Jeanne, I want to go to your wheelhouse, which is the shades of the Democratic Party. In 1952, you know what? There were shades of a Democratic Party. They were all the same. The difference from Stevenson to Estes Kefauver, come on, it was next to nothing. It was just geographic, it was regional. Somebody had a pet project in that. We have huge polarity in the Democratic Party right now. Is the vice president a progressive?
I am not sure that she will choose in that way. The reality is, as a political scientist, that vice presidential choices in all of our research seldom make any difference whatsoever. That said, this is an astounding situation, unprecedented in the modern era, so it likely could. And I think for Kamala Harris, as she thinks about her choices, we are hearing about the tremendous number of really attractive young Democratic governors across the country, from Shapiro to Andy Beshear to down in North Carolina to J.D. Pritzker in Illinois. It's a large number. I'm excluding Newsom only because he has the same problem Marco Rubio did for Trump in her home state. But that said, there's also been a lot of talk about somebody like Senator Kelly out in Arizona. If I had to guess, I think she is going to choose a geographic match rather, and somebody who she personally can work with, obviously, and who she thinks could be president if something should happen to her. as opposed to think about the ideological split in the Democratic Party. And the only reason I say that is because you're right, there is that difference in the party. But one thing that unites all Democrats right now is beating Donald Trump. That's at the forefront of all of their minds.
Okay.
And that's why I think she doesn't go progressive necessarily.
Beautifully said. David Gura, Terry Haynes has said this, and many others well. We're desperate for polls like we've never been in our modern political history. Based on your experience, David Gura, when does our audience get polls that begin to color the strength that the vice president has or the strength other candidates have?
It'll be some days until we get enough of them that we can have some confidence in them. But we know from our reporting and from others reporting that the Democratic Party was kind of polling the viability of Kamala Harris as a presidential nominee in the days leading up to this. We know that in this vacuum that the president was in, trying to figure this out, this was one of his concerns and the party's concerns, how this would work. And so we have had some polling thus far that illustrates what that matchup might be like with Donald Trump, and we've seen her hold her own in those polls. But to answer your question more thoroughly, Tom, I think until we get a more robust set of polling on this, it's going to take a few days until we figure that out. And I'm just going to note here the kind of endorsements and comments on this continue to roll in. We have a comment now from President Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. They're issuing a joint statement here about Kamala Harris. It begins with a preamble of them thanking Joe Biden for the service that he's had to the country in this role most recently, but throughout his long career. Then they say, we are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris, and we'll do whatever we can to support her. Jeanne, I'm curious how well Americans know Kamala Harris. You mentioned how insignificant the role of a vice president might be historically, how little a difference that might make, but she has name recognition, and that's something here. But how much do most people know about her and her record as Attorney General in California? And indeed, sort of what makes her tick? What are the policy agenda items that are most important to her?
You know, I think on the plus side, Kamala Harris has really done a very strong job of going out and talking about women's health, pushing back on the Dobbs decision, the right for people, I shouldn't just say women, to do what they want with their own bodies. And that has been something I think many Americans now associate with her. That said, to your point, while she did run in 2020, she was a, one-term senator from California, previously a state attorney general, so well known in that state, not quite as much across the country. Although as the first African-American woman and Indian-American woman to achieve the vice presidency, she did get a lot of coverage in the announcement of her choice. On the downside, she was flagged with the border issue for a long time, and that has really drawn down people's concerns about her ability to do this job. So there's some mixed reaction, but she is going to have to go out and sort of come out from Joe Biden's shadow, if you will. One thing I would note, and I think to her credit, throughout all of these last 3 weeks, she has been on the campaign trail pushing hard for Joe Biden, and her people were very clear. She is not going to get involved in this race to see who should succeed him. And so that is on the plus side for her.
I look at where we are, and folks, we want to draw in here not only the expected statements by worthies, by Democrats, by Republicans, but across all, and take advantage of the social media at this historic moment. Tim Alberta is at the Atlantic, and he's really done studies, careful studies of evangelical America, just among other things. And Jeanne, here's what Tim Alberta comes out really right now. Really cannot overstate how problematic this is for Trump's operation. Why is that? What radically changes for the campaign apparatus of the former president on this Sunday afternoon?
And Tim, who just wrote a beautiful piece on Trump's two campaign managers, and that's what I think he is alluding to. It was very clear in that really well done piece about Chris Lasavidas and Susie Wiles that their entire campaign was shaped by going against Joe Biden. To have this switch at the last minute after their convention, which is the most coverage, arguably, Donald Trump is going to get until, if there is another debate with a new candidate, they have to shift their entire focus. So the uncertainty we're talking about for the Democrats is also true on the Republican side. And that's what I think he's alluding to. They've got to quickly shift their focus now to Harris or somebody else because she is not the nominee yet.